Sorry for the delay. I've been sick, so it's taking me a little bit longer to get things done, to get back to my decent health. You probably notice my voice is a little bit gravelly, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But I know there's a lot of fucked up shit going on. I know things are bad, and I want you to stick with me on this one, because I think this one's important. I think this video is really important, and I think it's worth hearing me out on this. What's been happening has been very bad, and I could go over the ways, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to be helpful now, but I wanted to go over the responses, because I think that might be helpful. And I'm going to start by saying, if you're like me, you probably went to the No Kings protests, and you found a lot of hope in that. Some 5 to maybe 14 million people, depending on who you ask, attendees for regardless of what number, the single largest day of protest in United States history by number of people. And you had hope because you knew you weren't alone. And protest can be a powerful thing. It can show that we have community and connection to others. It can help us to see that we are not alone. But protest is supposed to do more than that. The main point of protests is two-pronged. The first is to bring attention to a problem. By protesting you down the streets, you get people aware of a thing that they weren't aware of, or they weren't aware of the scope of it. And I will say, in regards to the No Kings protests, that worked. I feel like that was good. I feel like that did its job on that prong. The other thing is the protests are supposed to be an action with a clear slate of goals, and those goals would need to be met in order for the protesting to stop. And I think that's where No Kings is failing right now. And organizing is hard. I won't discount that. But I think we have to look back to successful protests in history to understand what we need to be doing better. So when you look at the civil rights protests or women's suffragists, what they had was a very clear goal. The protests will stop if we are given civil rights. The protests will stop if we are given the vote. There's a very clear, we do a thing until something else occurs. Once that happens, we stop. And those protests were disruptive. People got arrested, people got beat. But those protests were also disciplined. So if you look back at the civil rights protests of the 60s, what you'll find is that they actually trained to do those so that they could be used to not reacting when they're kicked or spit on or hit, when the hoses or the dogs are sicked on them, so that even when these things occur, they don't hit back. So that all of the images, whether it be video or picture, all of that is of one side being violent and the other not. Because that makes it very, very clear who's right and who's wrong for people who aren't paying attention. And it can engender sympathy in people who don't have it otherwise. Now, we also saw that they picked the locations of their protests strategically, places where they knew they were to face the most vocal or most physical opposition, so that they could get the response they wanted, so that they would be attacked, so that their message would carry. These protests were centrally organized, at least the effective ones were, and because of that central organization, they were effective. So, look at No Kings. The ask there is vague. Generally, it's, we want Trump gone. But it's not impeach Trump. It's not disobey Trump. It's generally, we don't like him and think he should not have power, which is not actionable. And additionally, follow-up planning has been lackluster, to say the least. So the next No Kings protest is actually scheduled for, I believe, July 17th, which is the birthday of civil rights icon and former congressperson prior to his death, John Lewis. And it's called the Good Trouble protests. Now the problem with these is they're on a fucking Thursday. You got the largest single day turnout in United States history on a weekend, on a Saturday. And you want to show that that momentum holds, that it carries. You want to show those people will come out again and again and again. You want your numbers to increase, but at the very least, you don't want them to decrease. You especially don't want this to happen after a bunch of terrible fucking things have occurred. You have additional terrible things with the new budget, with the fucking alligator Auschwitz in fucking Florida. You have a bunch of terrible things that have occurred, which should spur more protest and bigger number. You want to show that what's happening is so unpopular that we can improve on those numbers. And so what you do is you pick another fucking weekend day. Because more people are available on the weekend than they are on weekdays. But if you pick Thursday, you are shooting yourself in the fucking foot. Because what's going to happen by putting it on a Thursday is your turnout will be less. I am here to tell you, we are not at the critical point where you can somehow get a bigger turnout on a Thursday than you got on a Saturday. And it was a mistake to do that. It was a mistake to put it there. And the reason they put it there was because it was John Lewis's birthday. Because it was one of those symbolic gestures that holds meaning but does not hold force. It was the protest planning equivalent of picking Merrick Garland to head the DOJ. It was essentially a fuck you that might make you feel good for a second, but is woefully ineffective to the task at hand. That's the problem I have with this upcoming rally, is that it's on a Thursday, which means people will be at work, which means it will not be as big, which means it will look like that movement of people who don't want what's happening to happen. It will seem like that movement is petering out. That's a fucking problem. And so I find myself a little bit peeved by the fact that we have failed so basic a test. I find myself peeved by the fact that we have failed so basic a test to plan a second day of protest that we've done it on a Thursday. So past that, I think when we all think of protest, we think of something that's grassroots, comes from the ground up. And I think that's not how that should work anymore. So right now, every single person you know has a microphone, and they can get their voice out to a bunch of people. I'm doing that right now. But when everyone has a microphone, it is very hard to get a clear, overarching message. We're all talking about different things in different ways at different times, and even if we're talking about the same thing, we might have different solutions. And so what happens is that there's no clear message. There's no one place to funnel people. There's no one message, one thing, one action that people have. Because there are too many people doing their own thing and hoping it pushes forward, hoping to rise above the fray, which is largely just luck or fucking attention economy. Like, I might get 24 people to watch this video. And that's about the reach I can get, which is not enough to start a movement. It's not enough to do any general action, especially when those people are spread across the country or across the world. So our romantic and historical idea of protest being a ground roots swell up needs to change. The protest, its message, its planning, its idealism, its fucking demands have to come from the top down. And the reason they have to is because, while I said this video might get 24 people to see it, if Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer or AOC or Bernie Sanders were to post something on their social media saying, here's the day we're going to protest, here's what we're protesting for, that will reach 100 times the people that this will in a fraction of a second. So many more people will see that. And so that means that that automatically rises above the fray. It automatically gets more buy-in from people. And that's what we need. We need more people involved. So this protest planning and this messaging and this set of goals has to come from above us. Because in the attention economy, any edge you get, you need to use. Your messaging and your idealism and what you're doing has to be on the forefront. And if it is, then you can make a movement happen. And I think that this ties in to something else that I've said before, but I will say again. Right now, what we need is something different than what we've ever had before. Calling your House representative, calling your senator is not cutting it. It's clearly not cutting it. All the theatrics around the bill, clearly it's not cutting it. They'll get in line with Trump no matter what. So, we need to do something different. And I think that this is another area where elected Democrats can do some good. Like I said, they have the platform to get the message out about protesting, to rally people to a singular cause, to a singular purpose, to a singular action. But they also have the funds to do something different. So what we know is that as they've taken a chainsaw to government offices, programs, that a bunch of people who worked there have been fired. These are people who had years of experience, who fully understand those systems, who fully understand those departments and those offices and how things work. So, what all that campaign cash should be used for is hiring these people. Hire these people who understand how things operate and use them to push back against this system. Use them to fight back at Social Security offices, to push back at HHS, to do it at the USDA, to do it at NASA, to do it everywhere. They know these systems, so let them use that knowledge to help us push back on the excesses and what is falling away. Build an alternative to the environment and ecosystem that the Republicans now control in our federal bureaucracy, and do it using the people they've cast out. These people who now need jobs. These people who now have a vendetta against the people who have screwed them over, who need a purpose, and who want to do something. Get those people on board. At the same time, there should be lawyers in every single one of the federal districts in this country since nationwide injunctions have been struck down. There should be lawyers on standby in every single one of the jurisdictions in this country to file injunctions when this administration does something illegal or unconstitutional. They should be ready to file those at a moment's notice, and they should happen simultaneously. If we cannot stop things nationwide with one case, we will do it with the 53 or the 93 or however many federal districts there are. That should be the goal. At the same time, you have a bunch of people like myself, people like everyone who went to those marches or those rallies, people who want to do more, who want to help, who have more time after the 5 minutes it takes to use 5 calls, and want to be able to help more. What you need to do, if you have power in this moment, if you are the DNC, if you are an elected Democrat, is you need to plan what that looks like and tell us how to deploy. Give us a mandate, give us a task, give us a thing to do that is not just calling. We can help. You have a third of the American population wanting to help stop this, but not being sure how to do that or where to do it. Not being sure what would be beneficial. What do you need help with that we can help with? We don't have the votes in Congress to do anything, but you have access to information. You know what's happening. You can point that out. People can dig into it. We can work on your fucking messaging. We can help get your message out there in a way that is better or more zippy or gets to more people. We can do that, but we need help. We need you coordinating what is happening, because I am one person and anyone else talking to a mic is one person. But I might reach 5 or 6 people, who then might reach 5 or 6 people. We need goals. We need the same thing in the protests. We need to know what our demands are and what we're going to do until they are met. What systems can we gum up? How can we make this more difficult for the fascists who are currently trying to demolish this democracy? We need to know, and we will help. But the planning needs to be better, and we need to stop seeing failures across the board. We need something to hope for. We need a purpose. We need work to do. So yeah, plan your own protests. If you're an elected Democrat, fucking talk to the caucus, get it together, and figure out what you're going to do. And then trumpet that out to everyone on your social media. Say it on every news interview, on every podcast you can. Get as many people to hear you as you can. What are our demands? What are we going to do until they're met? Then hire people who are let go from the government to help you navigate it and to stop it from its worst excesses, using every tool and trick and tip they know. And then tell us, the average people, what we can do. And more than just making calls, because it's not enough. It won't be enough. But you have to define what that is. So much of what needs to be done now to effectively push back on this is stuff that requires a platform and a voice, and it requires pulling attention away from Trump and his antics highlighting the terrible things they're doing and making sure that people don't forget it and making sure that supporting it becomes untenable. That's what we have to do. And that means that the people in the highest positions with the biggest megaphones have to be the ones leading. Because if we all try to do something different from the ground, we're not going to get anywhere. If each of us is standing there waiting to lift someone up, then no one's getting lifted up. So we need someone to direct that. And that's what I'm saying we need. That's what I'm asking that we have. If you agree with what I've been saying, if you think that this makes sense, then share this. Get this to people so that they can get this to people, so that we can hopefully get some sort of consensus, so that we can hopefully get someone in a position of power to hear this message that we need them now to lead, that they cannot look to us for leadership, that we need that from them. We gave them power when we elected them. They have the money, they have the power, they have the megaphone. We need them to use that, and we are here to support it. We are willing to help, but that help has to be more than making calls. That help has to be more than just showing up for a protest once every other month. And that fucking protest has to be on a weekend until we hit a critical mass where we could do it on a weekday. So please, share this. Help someone else see it. Help someone understand it. If you're still listening, I appreciate you sticking with me through it. As I always say, take care of yourselves and take care of others. Things are bad, but we're not done. We will not be done.